Welcome back to another edition of the Michigan Lacrosse Review. My name is Greg Norman, your host. We have a couple of outstanding guests today on this episode of the review. We're first joined by former MLL and outdoor star and Princeton All-American, Jesse Hubbard, probably one of the best offensive scoring attackmen that's maybe ever picked up a stick. We had a really fun time talking with him. He's going to talk a little bit about his time under Bill Tierney at Princeton and a little bit about the sport. We're also going to be joined by Joe Barcarella, who is the head of the National Interscholastic Lacrosse Coaches Association. It's a national organization that represents all kinds of high school coaches. He's going to explain the organization. At one time, USL used to have a arm that was dedicated to high school coaches that was dropped about 10 years ago. And Joe's organization picked that up, and he's going to talk about everything NILCA. So stay tuned. We're going to be back in just a second. Welcome back to another edition of the Michigan Lacrosse Review. We have, if you're talking scorers, there's like three names that come to mind, and Jesse Hubbard is one of those. And Jesse is probably one of the best scorers I ever watched play. And first of all, great career in the pro ranks, great career at Princeton, and I appreciate you coming aboard and spending some time with us to kind of talk about your career and lacrosse and everything related to lacrosse. The high school season is open across the country today, so it'll be fun having that conversation. So thank you for coming aboard. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Greg. I appreciate it.
We typically start at the beginning, kind of go back in your case to Washington and St. Albans, but I want to ask a simple question. Are scorers born or developed? And I say that because I think you hold every scoring record of any league you've ever played in or any school you've ever played for.
That's a good question. I think a lot of it is obviously practice, and in terms of lacrosse, actually being able to shoot the ball properly and getting the work in there and the time in. But I do think there's a mindset to being a good scorer. And if you think of different types of scorers like BJ Prager, Sean Hartopoulos, guys like that, Scott Conklin, to name the Princeton guys, they scored in very different ways. And I like to try to be a threat from different parts of the field and score in different ways as well. And so BJ Prager scored most of his goals right off the crease, but I think the mindset is one that is basically just a relentless, almost stubborn pursuit of finding the net however you can, whether it's getting open off ball or just blasting it by the goalie or using deception or whatever. So, and you can see when a scorer gets hot, they get in the flow state, and then they just start making plays and scoring goals. So I think some of it might be innate, but it is a lot of practice and technique.
Jesse, the unusual part of you though is you had so many, multiple 6-goal games, and that wasn't typical. When you scored in bunches. And is that the zone, or is it just a matter of the practice and all the balls you've had taken practice shooting and in the backyard and the wall and whatever else it might be? It's just one of those things, or is it something that is conscious?
Yeah, I think, like I said, if you're feeling it and your teammates are finding you and you're getting opportunities, then each goal kind of gives you confidence to score the next one. I was never a guy that, like, if I got my 2 or 3 goals, I was satisfied and stopped playing. So a lot of times when you do get goals, especially early in the game, it builds confidence. Your teammates have confidence in you, and they start maybe looking at you a little more. And I was fortunate enough to play with John Hess, one of the best feeders and quarterbacks ever. So if he knew that my stick was working and my shot was on, he was going to do everything he could to find me. And then I played with Chris Massey, another amazing attackman, who he opened up a lot of things for me because he was a dodging threat from the right hand and the left hand side. And so if Massey was doing his dodging thing and John was creating and beating his guy off the dodge, my job was easy, and I just had to get into open spots and put the ball in the goal in the back of the net. So a lot of it was a team effort. If we were executing on offense, I was going to get a lot of shots.
In basketball, they talk about having that sort of like just being unconscious if you're a scorer. And I think lacrosse, I think it's the same way. I think even if you're having a bad day, you don't think about not taking a shot because it's just part of the mentality. So that kind of goes back to the original question. Is that something you thought about, or you just knew that you could score?
Well, it's funny. I grew up in DC, as you mentioned, and DC lacrosse wasn't nearly as big as it is now back then. And so I went to some lacrosse camps. I went to Dick Adele's camp at Maryland. That was my first real exposure to the sport. I played in a little rec league, but and then I lived across the street from my high school, so I was able to, and I had an older brother, so we were able to practice throwing, catching, and shooting. And so I just shot a lot, and I didn't realize that maybe I could shoot better than other kids until like 7th or 8th grade, when I would go to these camps and kind of they would say, "Wow, like you can really shoot." And so I never thought of myself as a shooter necessarily until I got in organized lacrosse, and people just noticed it, and so they kind of put me in those spots. But I spent a lot of time practicing on an empty net alone, and for me, like, the lacrosse practice is fun. I mean, I played football in middle school, and football practice, I mean, hitting is fun, but it's not the you can't really practice football on your own much other than being in the weight room. But practicing with your lacrosse sticks, like, the best thing ever.
You spent a lot of your post-career teaching and coaching and running clinics and all kinds of things. From a shooting standpoint, in your mind, what's maybe the one characteristic that most kids don't have that you look at as a from a coaching standpoint that you would giving a tip to somebody?
Yeah, I also watched a lot of lacrosse. There's some guys who can shoot the ball really hard, and they have technically, they have good technique, but getting familiar with how the game evolves and how plays develop, I think that helps a lot, because being a scorer is about finding opportunities, finding space in the field, timing of maybe taking a shot that you otherwise wouldn't if you were up a goal versus down a goal. So I was very familiar with the overall sport. I watched a lot of as much lacrosse as I could. I mean, I would any lacrosse on TV, I would record and then watch over and over again, and then I would go to games. So I think being a smart lacrosse player helps being a scorer. And I see a lot of guys that just want to shoot the ball as fast as they can on every shot, and they don't realize maybe if you're in tight, take a little bit off and be a little use deception a little more. So a lot of it's kind of intuitive understanding of what to do at what time.
So off-ball movement may be as important as accuracy.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would say that very few of my goals were me shooting the hardest. I mean, very, very few. Most of them were taking some off it and using deception and moving. If you do have the ball, moving and getting the goalie moving and getting a quick shot off is definitely probably more important than sheer velocity.
Let me take you all the way back to St. Albans. You played, as you mentioned, that the DC area wasn't maybe the greatest place as it was compared to some of the other hotbeds of Baltimore and those kinds of places. But your brother Andy played at Princeton. Was on a couple of, I think, national championship teams, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, Andy was on the 92 team and the 94 team before I got there in 95. So he already had two rings.
Talk a little bit about high school. Was it he picking up a stick that got you involved, or was it mom and dad, or I mean, what was the?
Yeah, it was pretty much just mom and dad, like, understanding that we liked sports and probably needed some way to burn off energy, and so we got lacrosse sticks for Christmas, and we just kind of played catch and didn't really know much about the sport. And then one of our friends in the neighborhood, he went to Maryland lacrosse camp, and he came back from that and he was like, "Oh, this is amazing, you guys got to go next summer." So we all went to Maryland lacrosse camp, and that was what introduced me to the wider lacrosse world. And I mean, I felt like the biggest dork. I got like the off the rack stick and not the best helmet and pads, and I can barely throw and catch, and I definitely don't have a left hand. And I go there, and all the kids from Baltimore have their custom strung sticks and the flow and the double chin stop. And then I was like, wow, but this looks fun. I'm no good at this, but this looks really fun, and I'm going to practice hard to come back next year and maybe be a little better.
You never told us before, when we have young kids coming into our program, tell the parents I was to buy cheap sticks, the cheapest you can find, $35. I was in my garden one day and couldn't get rid of the weeds. You take a lacrosse stick and turn it upside down and rake the ground. It actually works as a great weed remover. So it has a dual purpose. So I understand your point. You had a great high school career. You were certainly recognition, all conference, all area, all state, all American. So Princeton, obviously your brother goes there, so that's an easy hook, but you got to play for Bill Turney. So you also had some opportunities with your brother being there to give you some ideas. So explain to Princeton why you wanted to go there? I'm assuming it's part of your brother being there.
Yeah, Andy being there was definitely an influence. I was very familiar with the program because once he decided to go there when he was in high school in '91, he and my dad and I, we started following the team, and so we'd go to games '91, and then '92 was Andy's freshman year. And Andy was he picked Princeton because he was an engineer and he wanted to go to their engineering school, and so his thinking was, well, they're pretty good at lacrosse, but they're not too good. So maybe I could actually get to play. And then his freshman year, he gets there and they win a national championship. And that was amazing. And then by the time I had committed to Princeton, they hadn't won '94 yet. That was my senior year of high school. But I knew that I liked the culture. I was familiar with the program. I knew that Coach Tierney was very dedicated, and Coach Metzbauer, to winning championships. And growing up in DC in the late '80s, I went to the College Park Final Four, the '89, the historic '89 championship game with Syracuse and Hopkins, Gary Gade, Paul Gade versus Petro. And when I went to that, I was like, this is amazing. Like, I gotta do whatever I can do to get there. And we were very fortunate. We played in 3 national championship games, 2 of which were at Byrd Stadium at Maryland, which I was in the stands at growing up. So it was pretty special to actually kind of achieve a dream. And I was very lucky to be able to do that.
At the time you go to Princeton, professional lacrosse and making a living at it was probably the farthest thing from your mind, because the money wasn't, it's obviously evolved over the last 20 years, but you have an economics degree. So what did a 18, 19 or 20-year-old Jesse Hubbard think about in terms of where you wanted to be when you got out of college?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. A lot of my friends got internships at Wall Street firms in college, and then a lot of them just started working right out of college in the investment world. And I tried out for the U.S. team my junior year after my junior year, and I actually made the team. And so after I graduated in '98, I got right into those '98 World Games. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I love lacrosse. I wanted to pursue it as far as I could. But there wasn't, like you said, there wasn't a lot of opportunities in the lacrosse world. But I got to know David Morrow, who is the founder of Warrior, and he needed kind of a product guy, and it was intriguing what he was doing because he was doing a lot of innovative stuff. But some of the products, maybe need a little tweaking for the high level players, other than the titanium handle. When he started making heads and stuff like that, that's when I kind of got intrigued by it. And we were on that '98 national team together, and I was stringing all the sticks for the guys because they all had to use Warrior sticks. And he said, hey, I might have an opportunity for you to come out and help design product and get involved in the business. So I said, yeah, that sounds great. And then there was kind of rumblings of a pro lacrosse league coming around, the MLL. And so all those factors kind of led me to think, well, let's see how far I can pursue lacrosse, and if I can get a job in the industry, and then also play some pro lacrosse indoor, outdoor, and do some camps. Maybe I can buy some time before getting a real job. That was my thought process.
Have you ever thought of the other road not traveled? Right now, what you might be doing if lacrosse wasn't a part of that landscape?
Well, I mean, I definitely wouldn't have had as good an experience if I didn't have the opportunity to pursue lacrosse, and if the MLL wasn't around, and if I didn't go work at Warrior, because I was like a lax rat. I loved the equipment. I liked stringing sticks, and so I got the opportunity to develop and design heads and sticks and stuff like that. And then the early years in the MLL were very exciting. So in terms of pursuing lacrosse and the sport that I loved, I have no regrets, because I took advantage of every opportunity.
And obviously you recognize more than most that Princeton's degree is second to none. There's very few schools that you're going to have that opportunity with that. The moniker hanging on the wall is certainly, Ivy League is terrific as well.
Yeah, some of my roommates, I remember when they were going to these interviews on campus for these Wall Street internships, I wasn't going to those, and they were like, "What are you going to do? Like, you need a job? Like, what are you going to do? Play professional lacrosse?" And I was like, no, but I don't know. I'll do something.
All right, well, let me back up. You go to Princeton, if I'm not mistaken, as a midfielder, correct?
Well, yeah, the funny thing was Coach T and Coach Metzi were they were at 205 camp, and I was playing midi there, taking face-offs after my junior year. And the prior year at 205, I played attack. And so they were like, "What are you doing playing midfield? You're a pure attackman. You're a scorer." And I said, "I don't know. I mean, I played midi for my high school a lot, and I think Virginia and Duke and some other schools were looking at me as a midfielder." And so they were all about me playing attack. And then so I get there, and freshman year fall, I played some attack, but we had Scott Conklin, a senior interior scorer crease guy. And so I guess they just decided that maybe I would see more time and get more opportunities if I ran midfield. And then we had John Hess and Chris Massey and Todd Eichelberger, who was a sophomore, kind of working the attack with Scott Conklin. So yeah, they did play me at midfield exclusively my freshman year, despite telling me I was not a midfielder.
Did you think you were an attack when you were playing midfield coming in?
Oh yeah, I was definitely an attackman. I just I mean, I had range on my shot, so most of my goals freshman year I think were man up. But no, I was mortified. I mean, getting stuck on defense and not knowing the Princeton system. I was very happy to settle in on attack sophomore year with Chris and John.
And I can't imagine being out of place in a Bill Tierney defense would be very helpful during film sessions.
Oh man, even the practices, like just practicing defense was not fun.
If I'm not mistaken, Hess, Massey, and you, has there been a better attack in terms of scoring and just pure offense? I'm not sure there's ever been a better trio that's ever played college lacrosse.
I mean, that's for other people to judge. Obviously, we played against the Virginia attack with Tim Whiteley, Doug Knight, Michael Watson. They were fun to watch. They were explosive. They did a lot of diving and bounce passing, and so we loved watching them just as fans. And then there was the Cornell attack kind of before my time, and even the Syracuse attack with Rob Cavavit, Casey Powell, and those guys. So I think people look back at our attack, and we were able to produce a lot with very good teams and a good defense, and we went deep in the playoffs, obviously almost every year. So people saw a lot of us, and we had a lot of opportunities to score. And in terms of just complementing each other, I think you couldn't find three people, both skill wise and personality wise, that complemented each other as well. I'm not saying that we're the three most talented or even the most talented group, but John Hess being a lefty feeder quarterback, me being kind of a righty shooter, off-ball guy, and then Chris Massey, who no one knew what hand he was, because he was just as good lefty and righty. He played the lefty shooter a lot because I was over on the right, and he was a slashing, dodging guy that could just go to the rack, and back then you could dive, and so you couldn't stop him. And personality wise, John's kind of he was the vocal leader. Chris and I kind of we a little more laid back, like just doing our thing. And so there weren't any egos. We were happy to share the ball. Like my role was not to carry the ball. That was more for John and then Chris. And so we were best friends off the field. And I think people could see that chemistry on the field.
I appreciate your humbleness, but you were Rookie of the Year. You were Player of the Year twice. I mean, you obviously, people recognize that, the kind of player that you were. I think that's something that at least from my perspective, it was fun watching you guys. It was just it was a treat to see the kind of, one of the conversations we had with Mark Millen was as coaches, we use various people as models sometimes to show our younger players and show film. You're a guy I show a lot to my dodging midfielders because you had that skill. And I think sometimes, again, appreciate the humbleness, but you're a bitch of a player. I mean, that's a fact. So at any rate,
Yeah.
What did you learn? What did you learn from Bill as a coach? I'm just curious. What did you learn from Bill as a coach that you could use? He's an older mentor kind of guy. What did you learn from him as a coach that helped in, sort of everyday life?
Well, I mean, I think we all learned from Coach Tierney that to never be satisfied with anything, and to always push ourselves farther than we are comfortable with. He also got us very used to being yelled at and receptive to feedback and negative criticism. I think a lot of people, their emotions get in the way of accepting criticism, even if it's a little exaggerated. But like if you're not playing well, or you're out of shape, or you're not playing smartly, like the coach is there to tell you that, and on an individual basis and a team basis. So he was harsh, but we loved him because like we wanted to play our best individually, and we wanted to maximize our potential as a team. And I think that you could say that Coach Tierney's teams, especially at Princeton, probably overachieved, and we get honors after the fact, after we win championships. I mean, there was definitely a lot of talent on, especially the later teams, but like that 92 team, like winning the championship and beating Syracuse. I mean, I think they were the only guys that thought they could do that. Like the guys on the team and Coach Tierney and Coach Metzbauer. I learned a lot from Coach Metzbauer about kind of like positioning myself for shots and kind of the technical stuff. But yeah, I think there's always a little bit of Coach T in our heads these days. Everyone who's played for him, who kind of questions like, is that good enough? You sure you can't do a little more? And then so that kind of that positive self-criticism, I think is something that makes people better if you're willing to kind of put up with it.
2000, there was a sort of an idea of having kind of a traveling 7-day circus to get professional lacrosse introduced to a variety of people, not unlike the PLL has done now. And you were part of that circus before they settled in and become the MLL. Prior to that, did you play any of those club teams that were?
Yeah, I played one club season in '99 after I graduated for Capital Lacrosse Club in DC. And that was a lot of fun. I mean, I watched some club games growing up, and those were all the best guys in back in the day. And then that next summer, as you mentioned, was the summer showcase made up of club guys and then the graduating college guys. And that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of excitement behind those games.
It wasn't as successful as I thought the organizers at the time. It did not get the hype, certainly on the sports pages, that it deserved. And they moved ahead, and the MLL went through a variety of more ideas about how they were going to run things. But that promotional tour, I mean, there's as many good players on the field in that promotional tour as there is now in the PLL, maybe even more in those days.
Yeah, I mean, that was the best of the best, and Dave and Jake they kind of tapped me to help them kind of pick the teams, because I followed the club in the indoor and in the U.S. national team, like the older guys, like being a fan, like I knew all those guys, and then playing against the college guys the last bunch of years, I knew all the college guys. So I think, I mean, it's tough picking those type of teams because there's always going to be guys worthy left out, but there's only so many spots on the field. So I think it was a great product. I remember the first game in Columbus, Ohio. There was a lot of energy, and yeah, we weren't going to get a lot of press. It's pretty difficult to get press, and this was pre-social media where you couldn't really create your own buzz through those channels. So we were kind of relying on the gatekeepers of publicity back then.
Between college and that first few years in the pros, what was a noticeable difference for you as a player? Faster?
Yeah, definitely faster and just much more skilled. But I played indoor after I graduated the following fall. I played for the Baltimore Thunder the last season in Baltimore before we moved to Pittsburgh and then to DC, and then eventually they became the Mammoth. But playing indoor was very helpful. I mean, after playing indoor, like you don't miss a ground ball, like you just don't, like and you don't, your finishing skills become much better. Your pick and roll game becomes much better. So I think I add a good amount of additional tools after playing indoor, leading into then the summer showcase in 2000 and the first few years of the MLL, that a lot of the club guys who also played indoor kind of already knew. We didn't really do a lot of pick and rolls necessarily in college. We did some all ball picks and some off ball picks. But yeah, I think just and that's why indoor now is so big in the US, because coaches and people realize like it's gonna improve your stick work like crazy. And the young kids now, like you don't see a missed ground ball anymore. You barely see any bad passes. And the shooting percentages of these college kids is like off the charts. It's like they're shooting 40-50%. And back in, when I played, it was like if you were 25-30, that was pretty good. You saw a lot of balls miss the cage, and you don't see much of that anymore.
You're a big, sturdy guy. The box game requires bigger, sturdier guys because of the obvious boards and just the way the game is played. How long did it take you to transition into that sport before you really felt comfortable? First year?
That was tough. I think I started getting it maybe toward the middle of my first year, but even then I wasn't really, because your instincts kind of default back to field game, like, dropping a stick, shooting sidearm is just kind of a no-no. And indoor, it's all about deceptive and where you release the ball, not where you put the ball. And then, yeah, I mean, it's things happen so much faster, and you're playing defense, and next thing you know, there's a guy like on your back cross-checking you, and you're on the ground, and your guy just scored, and your coach is yelling at you, and you're like, well, what am I supposed to do? He just cross-checked me from behind. And it's like, well, you have to know that. You got to like turn your head and like fight through that pick. And so, going back and playing defense and offense, that was probably the biggest thing that I had to learn was how to play defense indoor.
Did you like the physicality of the indoor game, and more importantly, did it help you then when you got back to the field in the MLL? I'm assuming that's got to be a huge bonus.
I did like it. I kind of like the up and back and the free flow. And it's different. I mean, there's no long stick, so you're not really worried about long sticks taking the ball away. You're more just worried about kind of dodging, and there's a lot of bull dodging in indoor, and you could lean in and use your body. And yeah, I think it definitely toughens you up too. I mean, the club ball back then was pretty brutal. I mean, guys are swinging hard, hitting late, and in indoor, it kind of it toughens you up. And yeah, you stop crying about calls after indoor because it's not going to do anything.
Well, it's hockey players don't complain when they get slashed. As a Canadian guy growing up in indoor game, this is one of the staples. I'm a believer that there's a lot of guys in America right now teaching field lacrosse in a small space and not necessarily teaching box lacrosse, because I think it's a much more horizontal game than it is on a field process. And I just wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's two completely different games. I mean, true box lacrosse and field lacrosse are very different. And I played on some smaller indoor facilities growing up with like big goals and stuff, but that wasn't true box lacrosse. I hope that the kids who are playing box lacrosse in the US are playing it the proper way, because that's when you really develop those skills. I mean, the catching. I mean, I used to joke when I did camps, like if I ever heard a kid say like bad pass, I'd say like there's no bad passes, like, and there's definitely no bad passes in Canada.
Right.
There's just passes. And you catch them or you don't, but you try to catch them. You can't expect every ball right in your stick. So, I mean, and when the Canadians started popping up after the gates in more numbers in college, I mean, that was the thing. They scored a lot of goals because they caught every ball that was thrown to them. And so that was kind of, I mean, and John Hess talks about, I was a very good catcher of the ball, which sounds so obvious, but like, yeah, you need to catch the ball if you're an off-ball player, if you want to score. Indoor
when you first got involved with indoor, were you surprised at its popularity, both here, not so much here, but certainly in Canada?
Not really. I mean, I grew up going to the Washington Wave games.
Okay.
when DC had an indoor team. Coach Rick Soll was the coach at St. Albans when I was in middle school. We would go watch him. John Nostrand was on that team as well. And he was the coach after Coach Soll at St. Albans. So I knew about the indoor league, and then when we lost the Wave, we would drive up to Baltimore and watch the Thunder games, and those were great. But yeah, I knew in like Buffalo, Toronto, Philly, and some of the other cities, it was huge, and I obviously knew that was the primary sport in Canada. So I was excited to play indoor when I got an opportunity. I was not really sure I was going to necessarily make the team, because there's plenty of great college players, scorers, who just their skills don't translate.
Made a comment to one of our, I think it was Mark Mellon, that sort of Long Island attackmen have been replaced by Canadians in terms of the sort of the niche player, certainly in American college lacrosse. But the NLL now, and I think have done a good job, in my opinion, with what they're trying to do with the PLL. You can be a professional lacrosse player, make a living now, much easier than it might have been when you came up. Do you think that the traveling circus that the PLL needs to maybe settle down into the communities that of like Baltimore's and Boston's and to be more successful? Or do you see that circus as being something that they'll keep that way? Just curious.
Yeah, I don't know what their plan is, but I feel like with the way people consume content now, for them, the games are basically photo shoots and video shoots. And then they're gathering content that then gets delivered in different ways, whether it's the actual streaming service or just social media clips. Because that's when, when I see a lot of PLL highlights, and it's like, it just finds me through various channels. And I think it, from a business model, I mean, if you think about trying to fill stadiums week after week after week, that's a different proposition. And that, the MLL teams had a hard time doing that. I mean, they'd have one or two games that were big, and then later in the summer people are on vacation. So I think I'm confident that the PLL will figure out whatever is the best model and that will work. I mean, maybe down the road, hopefully there'll be enough demand for them to stay in cities. But I think right now the traveling circus is, as you say, like is a pretty good model. And lacrosse is still a not well-known sport, so it's kind of like expanding the awareness of the sport. But and even during the PLL bubble, I mean, they did a great job of getting the games played so that they could get them on video and photo. I mean, their content is just, in my opinion, the PLL content is amazing.
Yeah, a little time at Warrior. You spent some time living here in Detroit, and Warrior was really instrumental in developing the product that a lot of companies. Dave Morrow was ahead of his time. Some of the work that you guys did together was certainly ahead of its time. There was an old term called Laxbro, and I'm just curious if that was a marketing tool or it just sort of evolved because of the process. You don't hear the term too much anymore, but it was for 10 years. It was a kind of a staple in conversation if you're around lacrosse.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we ever used Laxbro. I can't remember if Warrior actually used that term, but I think it was probably coined by other people, probably maybe outside lacrosse, and then inside lacrosse, people maybe used it to kind of mock, self-deprecating a little bit. But yeah, I don't really hear Laxbro too much. And I was all about the product, and like I said, I was a product guy, and having Dave, having a boss who's, like, as you mentioned, very innovative, very willing to try new things, thinking outside the box. It was great as a product guy, because we tried some stuff. It didn't all work, but we got to experiment. And I think that the quality of the products, Evolution Head and the titanium, and then the crypto alloy stuff, and the gloves, like, I mean, I think we did some good things from a product standpoint. And then, yeah, some of the marketing in general within lacrosse that time, I think maybe spiraled a little out of control, but I don't know if that's what you're getting at.
It was revolution. The marketing was revolutionary before its time. I still have Warrior coaching suits and things that I'm still wearing that are 10, 15 years old, and long before New Balance bought them. I mean, they did some things ahead of the marketplace. They actually did some things before social media was social media. And I think that attributed to it. But then the quality of the product that they had, we were always very proud from being from Michigan, and certainly being from Detroit, that Warrior was based here. It was one of our companies, and so it's yeah. And I think you guys were really ahead of the curve in the way you went about the business, because, like I said, there's a lot of people that try to emulate what Warrior did, and then of course eventually the marketplace, everybody is, imitation is the greatest form of flattery, so they kind of followed it down the road. But you had some good times and some good opportunities with Warrior when you were there.
Yeah, it was definitely a great experience, and I learned a lot about manufacturing and with the sporting goods industry. You have the hard goods, injection molded heads. You have the tubing, titanium and alloy. You have the cut and sew apparel, and then you have the cut and sew more complicated padding, and then you have helmets. So you learn a lot about different manufacturing processes. And I did a lot of traveling and went to the factories and handled that. So I was doing a lot of the, like, actual behind the scenes product development, and then I was also being used, like, in the marketing and posters and stuff like that as a player. But But like when stuff didn't get done right, like that was on me. And I did a lot of ordering of the components. And so there was a lot of, especially in the early years of the MLL, when we were not only making all the product, we were getting all the custom product. And so if the MLL custom stuff's a little behind, that's on me. And then I got to get ready to play. And then I got to make sure all the guys like their stuff. So it was definitely a lot.
When was your last professional game? 2010?
I think it was 2008. I played my last year. I played for the LA Riptide, which was a great organization. GW Mix ran the show, and John Tucker was our coach, and we had a great group of guys. And we lost in the semifinals in Boston at Harvard to the Outlaws. And I think that was my last game, if I'm not mistaken, 2008 season. And then they contracted in 2009. I was going to maybe play another year, and I was put on the Bayhawks, but I had some nagging injuries and just thought it was a good time to hang them up.
Are you still playing like at Vail or Lake Placid? Are you still playing, just for fun?
I wish. I mean, lacrosse it's not really recreational activity. And some of my buddies play a lot. I don't know how they do it, but I played in Placid a few years back, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And it's just the body's not happy with me after I do that. So I think I'm pretty much done.
Last question, and that goes back to the 98 World Games. Is that the best game you were ever involved in? Finals?
I mean, I don't think it wasn't that fun to be a player, because we got that big lead and then we just saw it get taken away. And so that when we won that game, it was more relief than joy, to be honest. Now, it was an amazing game for the fans. And it was funny that we're playing at Hopkins, and just because the fans wanted to see a game, they were cheering every goal that Canada scored. They were cheering, and we're looking around saying, aren't we the home team? But yeah, it was an amazing game. I mean, those guys, those Canadian men, I mean, they were Tavares, Gate, and I mean, they for them to come back like that was unbelievable. I mean, that, like, I obviously didn't want to lose the game, but it's almost as if they won the game because they pushed us that far. And we had Ryan Wade and Mark Millen make some huge plays down toward the end. But yeah, if I was a kid growing up, even a kid from Baltimore, I it's not that hard to root for that team when they're making a massive comeback.
Any advice? This is absolutely the last question. Any advice for young guys that would watch this and go, how do I become better at the game? What's some of your advice that you give to a 15-year-old kid that wants to get better?
Well, I think a lot of kids are doing it now with online videos and stuff. My advice would be to watch lacrosse, high level lacrosse, and that will give you visualizations in your head for what to think about when you practice, and then obviously go practice, and then make sure that you keep it fun, both practice and on your own, and then practice for your team. And I was always looking for more lacrosse because there wasn't much lacrosse. So any opportunity, any camp, any little team, there wasn't really club teams back then, I was dying to do. And I think nowadays there's so many opportunities that I hope these kids are, they're obviously loving it. But I just liked shooting on the cage in the middle of the summer, just me, 2 balls. I'm not a big bucket of balls guy, because if you have a bucket of balls and you start missing, it doesn't punish you. If you have 2 balls, you got to have 1 ball to shoot. Then you got to have a backup in case it flies over the fence. But if you have 2 balls and you're missing the cage, you got to go chase those balls. And so you're more likely to hit the cage. So I just love the practicing and trying to hit the perfect shot by myself on the field. And I think kids are still doing that. I mean, the skill level of middle school, high school, and college kids now is unbelievable. So they must be doing something right.
Well, listen, I really appreciate the time you spent with us. You should check out YouTube and watch Jesse Hubbard play lacrosse, because there was very few that were as skilled as you were. And that's a bit of a biased statement, but that's okay, because I can say what I want. At any rate, Jesse, thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much, Greg.
Welcome back to the second session of the Michigan Lacrosse Review. I'm lucky enough today to have with us Joe Barcarella, who is the vice president of the, get this right, acronyms always get me throw me a little bit, National Interscholastic Lacrosse Coaches Association. And Joe, first of all, I appreciate you taking a couple of seconds out to talk to us. You have an interesting organization that covers a lot of ground, but I'm talking to you because I think there's a lot of people missing the boat with your organization. And I want to go through the history and then sort of what it cost and then go the rest of it. So let me take you back, 10 years? There used to be, and I know this, and I'm going to shut up in a second, but I know there used to be a high school panel within U.S. Lacrosse's hierarchy. I used to be the president of the WCLA division of that, and that was the Women's Collegiate Club division. So you get dropped by USL 10 years ago, and I'll let you pick it up from there.
Okay. And, you know, it really, they restructured, and why they restructured, I have no idea. But we decided to keep our committee. It was a small committee at the time. Ren Pantinelli, who was the president at the time, I was vice president, and we had a couple other guys involved. But we wanted to keep it going because we think it's important. And so we went down to the IMLCA convention. We sat down with Richie Mead, who was president at the time of the IMLCA, and Phil Butterfuco, who was the executive director. And back in the old days, the college guys and the high school guys were aligned. I believe it was NILA, and at the time for the high school guys. And we thought it was a perfect fit. And we've been working closely with them. Ren sits on the board of the IMLCA, and I sit on the convention committee. And so we're involved with them, and we're trying to make it better. And one of the things we're trying to do is grow the high school game and make it relevant again, especially in the day of club lacrosse. Club lacrosse is not going away, but we need to make the high school coaches and their programs relevant again.
What is your mission statement? What is it that you do? What do you provide me with for what we'll get to the membership in a second, but I'm a coach. I belong to the Michigan High School Lacrosse Coaches Association. This is the national version of that. So what is it you're going to do for me if I send you a check?
Well, we have a membership card. We got that. Keeping our members informed on everything that we know that's going on. We're trying to build the membership so we gain more power, especially with the NFHS. But we're working on that. We send out a newsletter and numerous emails.
Okay.
Especially your program. Your program's been great. I've been sending that out to our members.
That's good. All right. So how much is it? Let me back up a little bit. How many members and how many states are you covered in at the moment?
Great question. We have 400 as of today, 401 members. We gained our 400th member the day before, grabbed another coach today. And I just lost my train of thought, Greg.
I was asking how many states have you covered at this moment?
32 states, and we have two members from Canada.
Okay, so your reach is starting to get there, as it were.
Yeah.
Now, the reason we're talking is that we want to bring some exposure to the organization. You're also, I think, in the next couple of days doing your third Hall of Fame.
Yes, correct.
If I'm not mistaken, one of those members is a former Michigan coach, Rob Ambrose, who was a legendary coach here at Birmingham Brother Rice. Am I correct on that?
Yes, correct.
Okay. When and where is the dinner?
It's March 12th at the Plandome Country Club. We've been holding it there for all three inductions. Our sponsor was Mr. Denahan, whose sons Connor and Dan were very good players.
Okay. Now, if I want to join the organization at the end of this show, I'll put a panel up with all that information. And so if they need to find it, they can go in and then right under your name, once I edit this, right under your name is your website information. So it's yes. Sitting there in front of you. You're a high school coach and a teacher, am I correct?
Retired teacher, but I'm subbing every day. I retired in 2019, and I've been a head coach numerous years now. I'm coaching JV at Farmdale High School, and the head coach, Mike Hungerford, he was my first assistant when I first became a head coach. So things go in circle.
No doubt. 5 years from now, where do you see, what would you like to see with the organization? What is, as a vice president, you spearheaded a good portion of this the last decade. 5 years from now, what would you like to see? Where would you like to be?
Membership wise, we'd love to see as many high school coaches as possible. 1,000 would be great. Even more than that would be nice. I think we need to have a seat on the NFHS committee when discussing roles. I think that's a big part. I'm not sure how many coaches they really have there. When you look at their list, you really don't see high school coaches being represented through that committee. We're trying to build a relationship with USA Lacrosse now, with Mark Riccio being the new CEO. That's something we would like to do. And I would like to bring back the All-American All-Star game for the seniors that went away several years ago. I think that's a good thing, and I'd like to bring that back.
The reason that's an interesting question. We've been doing some interviews and we've been talking. The last 2 or 3 players that we've been involved with were part of the Great North-South game for years. And that game has lost its luster over the last 8-10 years. And partly because travel and because of all of the carpetbaggers, those are my words, not yours. But the guys that are the profiteers that are in this thing, they've kind of sort of diminished a lot of the things that were usually staples in the schedule. And it would be great to see, kids play from different places. If certainly is true in the basketball world, the football world. I know the U.S. Army and Under Armour, they do tons of stuff at the end of the season.
Yes.
And by then it doesn't. We're pretty universal in terms of recruiting, but in terms of being able to see the kids that don't get the opportunity, that'd be a phenomenal thing. Okay, so the last thing. And explain really how important it is to be on the federation board, or at least to have some political sway, because sometimes those organizations they can be interesting if you follow the politics.
Yeah. Well, several years ago, we lost the U19s. The high school coaches lost the U19s when USA Lacrosse decided to go with the college coaches. And I'm really not sure of the reasoning. One of the reasons I heard was that the college coaches know the Canadian players better. And I think if you're a good coach, it really doesn't matter. One of the things that USA Lacrosse is doing is the development teams with the youth, the U16s, and I believe it's the U14s, and trying to get the high school coaches involved in that. Supposedly they're coming up with an application for the high school coaches. I'm not sure. I haven't seen anything yet.
Okay. Well, listen, appreciate you explaining what the program is, and best of luck with your Hall of Fame. We'll get this posted, and then stay tuned for a couple of seconds so you can get the information behind it. And Joe, have what hopefully is a great JV spring for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Just want to thank Jesse and Joe for coming aboard today. They certainly make a great show, and I think some really fun conversations. So we'll catch you next time on the Michigan Lacrosse Review. For all the guys in the back, thanks for watching.